I am very happy to be sitting here with Alexander Sultan, the new president of Alpha Kappa Psi. Alexander, thank you for running and being the president for us for the next 2 years. I appreciate everything that you've done in the past. I would like you, however, to first start with telling us what chapter you're from, when you became a brother, and maybe a little bit about the background of what you've done over the last several years.
So I pledged back in fall of 1993 at Mu Sigma, which is San Diego State University. And the irony of it is, if you look back on my history as being a pledge, I have to say, if you ask any active member who remembers me, I was one of the worst pledges. I was the most outspoken, always had questions, asked all the whys. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And never really was always satisfied with the answer. So I was always labeled as a problem pledge. So what was really refreshing about the election when it was all over was a lot of those old alumni were sending me Facebook messages, text messages, and emails saying, we never in a million years would have ever thought that you would ever be the fraternity president, and we're really happy we didn't kick you out of the pledge program. So from that perspective, I guess it's kind of ironically funny. But the interesting thing about that, and just to touch on that briefly, we sometimes train pledges to be really good pledges. And I wasn't the star pledge. I was by far not the star. I was in the bottom half of my pledge class. But if you looked at all the pledges who crossed over and became active members in the second half of the semester, our first active semester, they were not that active. They were star pledges. They were fantastic, super pledge, amazing, doing everything. But when they became brothers, they became more complacent, less involved, and eventually, over time, started to slowly drop out. And if you look at all of those pledges who were kind of, as you say, the problem pledges, almost all of them are really active. So I guess the lesson I learned from that was, and I carried it forward when I worked with other pledge classes as a brother, was you can never judge a pledge based upon a pledge class. That the best pledge doesn't always make the best active, and vice versa. You asked me a little bit about what I've been doing in the last couple of years. In the fraternity, when I graduated from my chapter, about 2 months after I graduated, there was an opportunity to run for regional director. So I saw a need in the Southwest region to be the regional director. It was based on the fact that there didn't seem like there was a lot of good communication going on between the management team, the regional management team, and the student chapters. So I saw a niche market, and that was student chapters really wanted to, wanted some direct contact with the regional director and wanted some sort of, involvement. They wanted some sort of leadership. And at the time, I thought that was what I was providing to them. What I didn't realize at the time was maybe the regional director's role is not that. So, it's one of those things, you see something, you see a need for it, and then as you get more experienced, you start to realize that your initial perceptions aren't always the most accurate. So, it's one of the things I've learned over the history of being, a regional director and then a vice president, EVP, and I guess now president, has been when you come into a position, the one thing you should do, which in the beginning I did not do, you should sit, listen, observe, and make judgments, and then come up with a conclusion. And what I had not done was in the beginning of my fraternal careers, I was somebody who kind of shot from the hip. So I'd come into a position and immediately act. And I've learned over time that doesn't exactly work. Corporate America has helped me realize that too. When I graduated from San Diego State University, I started working at Booz Allen Hamilton as a consultant, and I was with them for about 7 years. And my progression from a consultant to more of a manager and then engagement manager, made me realize that as a lot of the lessons I learned in the beginning of Alpha Kappa Psi as a pledge, as a student member, and then as an alumni, as both a volunteer, I learned that throughout that whole progression, there was a lot of interesting things and life lessons that you get from it. I learned that, it's the same thing. You have to, going into consulting engagement, you have to listen, you have to observe, you have to study the data, and then make a conclusion or provide strategy. So that helped me, I think, through Alpha Kappa Psi directly helped me with my consulting when I was working at Booz Allen. And most recently, as you probably have known and I've mentioned before, I'm working at KPMG in their advisory service. So again, it's the same thing. A lot of this, I learned as a pledge, ironically, carried over into the student membership, into the volunteer role, and then carried into my professional life. So that's been very valuable to me.
So you talk a lot about the fact that as a pledge you weren't very good, right, but you got better and better. We develop principal business leaders. Would you say that the process that you went through was a good way for you to become more developed as a principal business leader?
What made me developed, I think, and as far as a principal business leader, was the safety net of being an Alpha Kappa Psi and the ability to fail. I was very lucky as a pledge. I failed a lot. I made a lot of mistakes as a pledge, but my chapter had decided to give me many, many chances. And the reason why they gave me many chances is because every time I made a mistake, I owned up to the mistake and I learned from the experience. I'm a big proponent of failure. No one wants to fail, and I personally believe that failure is actually acceptable. In fact, I highly encourage people to try something and fail at it. I think where it becomes a problem is if you continuously fail and you don't ever learn anything from it, then that's an issue. But if you fail at something and then you learn from that experience, then when you actually are successful at it, you can always look back sort of at what you've done before and the previous failures that you had. And as long as you make them life lessons and you learn from those life lessons, I think that's really the invaluable experience. And I've taken Alpha Kappa Psi as an opportunity to try new things out, new leadership styles, failed at that as a student member. I tried new things as a regional director, failed at that. But every time I made a failure, I always made sure I learned something from it, because it helped me to develop both professionally and personally. And that's what I've always used Alpha Kappa Psi as an ability to continue to improve myself both personally and professionally.
Is there ever a time when we become the epitome of a principled business leader, or do you think it's always a constant learning experience?
I would have to say it's a constant learning experience. I don't think any of us will ever get to what I would say is the perfect leader. There's very few people who I've ever seen as a perfect leader. Those would be like, I'd call them servant leaders. Individuals like Gandhi, for example, I would say is a servant leader. Somebody who's principled. As controversial as this might be, there's principled leaders out there who have the wrong principles. Look at some of our dictators that we've had in the past. I mean, they're technically principled business leaders. They're not principled business leaders. They're principled leaders, but they don't necessarily have the right principles. Yeah. The one thing I like about Alpha Kappa Psi is our core values, our brotherhood, leadership, unity, education, and knowledge. Those core values are absolutely valid as far as they're things that everyone says, yes, I want to have integrity. You want to have leadership, you want to have some sort of unity, you want to have some knowledge. Those are all items I think that you have some core values.